On the back tables here, we have, these are the panel here from the Ashland Middle School, the children, the young people, the students that had created that, and with Christy Healy. Thank you, Christy, for bringing this out here. But please take a look before you leave today. In the middle area is some information about the Ashland Coastal Peace Commission, but most specifically, to get information on our newsletter. Go ahead and sign your information there. And then the table over here is with Rotary and with Chuck Root. And would you come up here real quickly, please? And Rotary International, the Rotary Club, has a tremendous focus on peace and peace building. It's a growing focus that is important. I'm a member of the Rotary E-Club for World Peace, and we meet on Zoom every Tuesday between 6:30 and 7:30, and it's an amazing group of people from around the country, other places, but the focus is on peace building. Rotary has a real strong focus on that, and we also have a couple of Rotarians that came from Portland down here specifically to be here today and brought these items, and Chuck brought the peace pole. So just want to say a couple things briefly about Rotary and the peace focus.
All right, thank you. Hey, isn't this fun today? What a great day. Wow, very inspiring. One thing that Rotary does quite a few things, including the E-Club that David just said that he's a member of. But another thing that we do is try to train peace leaders. So we have a master's degree program where we provide approximately 50 individuals a year an education in peace and conflict resolution at 5 different universities around the globe. Each applicant must go to a different continent to be in part of the program. And also a certificate program for another 50 a year where people that have been involved with peace and conflict as a career would come and get their batteries recharged. And that's in Thailand. And that's a very good program as well. Rotary does offer a variety of things. There's literature back there. Take a look. And once again, nice to be with you. Thanks.
Chuck was a former district governor, and he sent out a lot of information into the Rotary world about the conference and what is taking place. So there are many more people that are here who are aware of what is taking place. I'd also like to thank some of our sponsors, and I will through our time together, but most specifically a couple of our donors this took a lot of energy and it took money. And without the support of the donors and the sponsors, we would not be having this event at all. So I'd like to thank Barry and Catherine Thalden for their donations. Thank you. They assisted in all that we're doing. And Al Jubitz, he is not here. And Al Jubitz is from the Portland area. He's a Rotarian. He came down here specifically, flew down for the day to see what's going on, also to get information about the Peace Officer Program. And he has a foundation, Al Jubitz Family Foundation. They were very supportive of us. And also Greeley Wells, who is Mr. Greeley. Where are you? Oh, there he is, over here. Greeley was a wonderful donor, and you see the videographers here. The conference is being very well covered. It's going to be, I'm not quite sure about the timing, but it could be a month out. But we're going to be compiling the information, bringing out a number of, so this could be seen again. RVTV, we have a number of people from RVTV here. So I'll send out information when this is available, but Greeley is a key part of that. And Herb Rothschild, I don't know if you are here, and Herb Rothschild was a very strong supporter. No, there he is, out there, yes. Thank you very much. And also the key sponsors that we have: the City of Ashland, very definitely; Rosebud Media. This is Zaslow is over here. Thank you very much. Al Jubitz Foundation, the Ashland Hills Hotel and Suites, and Asante. Thank you very much, Sheila. So these are prime sponsors, and thank them all. So let us move into the next speaker, and we're just a delight to have Dr. Saul Arbess. He's the director of the Canadian Peace Initiative and the co-founder and director of the Global Alliance for Ministries and Infrastructures for Peace. Dr. Arbess has been a key person in moving towards, helping Canada move towards a Department of Peace. Dr. Arbess.
Thanks very much, David, for this introduction. I must say that it's been an extraordinary morning, and I find it a little, as the next speaker, a little bit daunting, actually, to follow on. But I'm very, very pleased to be here. It was a wonderful invitation that I got from David and Irene to be present here. I had made a previous visit and visited the Universal Peace Flame. I was very impressed by that and by their work. Now, we all know that this is the International Day of Peace, and on the International Day, there's a very simple ceremony that's conducted, which is also very appropriate now, right after lunch, which is the period of slumber often. So, what I would like to do, you can see the peace pole here. There are 8 different languages represented there, all of which say the same thing: may peace prevail on earth. Now, in this very simple ceremony, we say, may peace prevail on earth, together, and then, not yet, and then we say, and often in the actual language of the country that we are referring to, we say, may peace prevail in that country. So what I would like to ask, if it's possible, I believe there are Spanish-speaking speakers here. Is that correct? It doesn't have to be fluent Spanish. Or Arabic. Arabic is another language which would come into play. But if not, did anybody raise their hand for Spanish? Oh, thank you. Yes, who could do that? Maybe David will do that. Okay, so again, I will say it, and then I will ask you to repeat after me. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in China. And can you say that? Thank you. May peace prevail in Syria. May peace prevail in Syria. May peace prevail in Afghanistan. May peace prevail in Afghanistan. May peace prevail in the United States of America. And may peace prevail on earth. Thank you. May peace prevail in our hearts. Aho. We might have Salish language here. Our elder, is she in the room still? Thank you. But I would say about Native American languages is that there is a tremendous effort now to recover those languages lost through the residential school experience and other forms of discrimination. I'm from Canada, and in Canada, we have an official policy of reconciliation at all levels of government and virtually in all institutions that has been taken to heart by Canadians. to restore our relationship not only with First Nations, as we use the term in Canada, as opposed to Native American, we say First Nations or First Peoples, but also through that restoration with our relationship to the earth. Thank you. As this talk will be a little bit different than the others, happily. It'll be a little bit more on the ground in some ways, and very practical, and again, engaging where, in fact, the Ashland Commission on the Culture of Peace will fit into a much larger picture. So I'm going to talk about this term, infrastructures for peace, is a relatively new term. Maybe David knows it much longer. But the term is simply about building a peace architecture. But the term I4P has become the prevailing way in which it is spoken. So if I can have the first slide, please. Oh, that's me. Okay. So I'm providing here a couple of definitions, which you can see that the image implies scaffolding of reaching from the local to the global. And the UN Development Program has been extremely active, especially in Africa, on infrastructures for peace. And I'll speak a little more specifically about that a little bit later, as has the Berghoff Foundation in Europe. So we begin with this, we look at this, and the critical aspects of it, and this is where people on the ground here in Ashland and elsewhere really come into play, because it is a bottom-up sort of set of ideas. It's critically important that people on the ground in their local communities are responsible at that level for those conflicts that occur here. As we heard this morning from these wonderful panels, how people are engaged in the culture of peace in this way. And the interesting thing here is it's not imposed by the state. It's critical that the state, in this case I mean the nation, supports this program, that there is a national program that exists at all levels within a given society, but that you begin at the local level and you empower the people there to make decisions relating to peace and conflict in their communities, as we have seen examples here today. And another point that's very, very important is that it is not imposed by the state. The actual way in which conflict is resolved is not imposed, but what is encouraged is engaging local leaders that have respect in the community. They could be the elected people, but not necessarily. They could be people from civil society, and working in culturally appropriate ways. We know, for example, that among our Native Americans, there is a very strong tradition of peace building, peacemaking, and all kinds of historic relationships that existed in very, very vast regions across all parts of both the United States and Canada. I can't really speak for Mexico, but I presume something like that exists there. So we begin at this level. Then we bring it up to the state level. And at the state level, you have the State of California Democratic Party has recently endorsed and has moved to create a Department of Peace at the state level. Something that, in fact, hearing from the people from Oregon, this might be something that could be initiated here because it seems to be a very, very fertile ground for some kind of development like this. And then, and I also mentioned, though, while I was speaking about the local level, is here I just learned about Peace House today that's existed for pretty well 30 years. The Rotary and Rotary International, it's 8 Points for Peace, which have, and its scholarship program and so forth. So this is very important. So then at the state level, something like a Department of Peace, a Secretary of Peace, or something like that. And then at the national level, and there's a lot of activity that's happening at that level, of course, is the U.S. Institute of Peace. which is a critical institution at arm's length, as David has explained, from government, but influencing government through its action. We have the national program for the Department of Peacebuilding bill, which this week or last week, in this very recent time, I think 150 or more people from across the country in the U.S. Peace Alliance have been in Washington and D.C., as they do every September, to speak to Congress people and their representatives about moving this bill forward and increasing the number of sponsors so the bill can move forward. As you may well know, the inspiration for the modern movement for departments or ministries of peace was your own former Congressperson Dennis Kucinich, who has been absolutely pivotal in this movement, along with Marianne Williamson, who has, as you know, used her platform as a candidate for the Democratic nomination for president to speak eloquently about the need for a Department of Peace building in this country. So we have these kinds of levels, and what I'm trying to speak to here is what I would call the institutionalization of peace. One of the problems that we have very often is that at whatever level there is conflict, often what happens is you get people coming together to create a solution, and then they tend to dissipate. But if we look, so we don't have this kind of permanent scaffolding structure called infrastructure for peace. And this is what we're trying to promote around the world, that this would be a critical movement, because on the one hand, you have the Departments of Defense, really, until after World War II, called the War Department, and we should not lose, we must remember that fact. But that's exquisitely and very elaborately organized at all levels of your society, our society as well, financed to a level beyond the imagination. Maybe, I think it's almost, in this country, for example, it could be, I know it's more than 50% of all U.S. discretionary funding. And this is a remarkable statistic to consider. So we need a parallel structure. We need a countervailing structure of peace building, which is permanent, which is on the ground, which is contrasting and able to balance the influence of decision makers at all levels within this country. So infrastructures for peace should become as natural as your energy infrastructure or your health infrastructure. It should be also institutionalized. For me, it's a missing link. So each level works to deal with conflict at its own level and is sanctioned and recognized by the levels above that. And I was asking the chief of police today about whether restorative justice is active in this community, formally speaking, and he said, actually, it isn't. But in many cities across, Americans have been at the forefront of this very, very central movement, which is exactly the model that I'm speaking of, because what it does is it brings to a circle, you call it a healing circle, a reconciliation circle, all parties that are engaged in a conflict on both sides or multiple sides of a given conflict. Those people, through a facilitated process, determine an outcome by consensus and a program of action, if you like, of how to implement that solution on the ground. And when those cases are referred by attorneys general or by the police, it works in about 96% of the time. And then the charge, which would have been there, is then dropped. So it's just called diversion from the courts. And if you look at that model at the local level, you can see that at each level it is an appropriate kind of approach. And remember that when we talk about the official, the official level, it is more difficult to organize, it's more complex to organize, but people on the ground who are directly involved in an issue, in a conflict, are available and can act, and as the evidence shows, can act in a very excellent way. We also know that, I don't have a statistic with me today, but that recidivism, for example, within the framework of crime, is far reduced compared to the revolving door phenomenon that the police encounter with repeats of offenses by offenders after doing jail time. So specifically within the framework that we're speaking of, I would like to talk about, let's see, we're going to go to the next one. So Canada has created the world's first ambassador for women, peace, and security. Now you'll notice that this language mirrors exactly UN Resolution 1325, which our ambassador friend here has been very crucial in its development, that it mirrors that role and is really bringing forward the increased participation of women in all aspects of peace building. We know that women and children, and girls in particular, are the most impacted by war and other forms of conflict, and this is a step forward in Canada to work with this phenomenon and to support the things that I've indicated here. It's so new, I still have it as proposed, but it came into play in June of this year, so that is very, very recent. And I must say that, again, in terms of civil society engagement, members of our group through the National Action Committee on 1325, which exists ideally in every country, and which is responsible for making reports to the UN on progress in this regard. So Canada has engaged itself deeply in this and has actually provided something called the Equality Fund, which will actually invest $300 million worldwide into activities related to this work, this position, and that resolution. So we have, as we've heard here throughout the day, we have very heartening developments in every area and at all levels. And I want to speak now about, if we build these structures, infrastructures for peace, then I want to show you how that might operate on the ground in terms of the induction and training of peace workers as opposed to those in the military. So that's going to go back to, right. I've been working on this, and this is just very much a work in progress. But what I'd like for you to see is that how well organized military induction and training is. Extremely well articulated. We know there is huge disputes about military recruitment into schools. They bring around a multi-million-dollar trailer, which is exciting, which uses video and uses video games and other forms of enticement for our young people to embark on a military career. And we can see that it moves through various levels. But no such thing actually exists, in my understanding, to develop peace workers, those wonderful young people that were here today, and the other youth that are with us today, the flame keepers and so forth. Would they have had a start? Where do they go from here? So, for example, in Canada, I use this term peace cadet. We actually, so in the military in Canada, all three services have, at the age of 14, the induction of cadets, military cadets. But there's no other opportunity for peace cadets or whatever we would call it. One outstanding example, however, is in restorative justice. And our friend here, the teacher from this middle school, has told us about the use of mentioned restorative justice practices in the school. Exactly the circles I'm talking about, whether it relates to bullying or other kinds of incidents, or parent-teacher or teacher-student conflicts, where these students themselves convene a circle of the type that I spoke about to work to resolve the conflict. In other words, the worst possible outcome in a situation of bullying, for example, is expulsion. Everything about restorative justice is about reintroduction, about coming together again, and healing the harm. That's the key phrase, healing the harm that has been created by whatever incident we are talking about. And this is a very powerful movement. It comes by different names in different parts of the continent, but it is happening not just in North America. So we need something like Peace Cadets, some opportunities to work in the community, to work with elders, for example, or other kinds of peace-building work, of which restorative justice is a good example. Then at the next level, we do have, as you know, degrees, mostly at the bachelor level, but also at the master's level, degrees in peace and conflict studies, which usually and must surely always should involve field work in active areas of conflict. Following that, in Canada now, we have developed something called the Civilian Peace Service Canada. Now, you know about Nonviolent Peace Force and other forms like that that do exist in several countries. But what we're looking at is there's a certification process. It's parallel, if you like, to military commissions. They're not commissions, but what they are doing is a system of certification of these workers, which has become recognized by governments so that they are sought out to work in that field. And then, of course, like in the military, rising through ranks, we don't have a ranking system and we wouldn't be doing that, but promotional opportunities in the field of infrastructures for peace. So how do we fill those infrastructures? This is one of the ways to do it. And this gives us a snapshot of how this might work on the ground as career opportunities, which really are not often present in the contemporary world. So these are things that I wanted to bring to your attention. As I say, it's a work in progress. We're looking for assistance in building this model, but I think it will encourage these wonderful children that we've seen here today to perhaps take up a career as peace workers. I promised my talk would be brief today because I want to give time for conversation. I don't really like the idea of question and answer. I think it's better, and if the circumstances would provide, I would be sitting down with you here, but because this is a room full of extraordinary gifted people, and I must say I was incredibly impressed by what I've heard all day today. So, and of course the ambassador and Dr. Yang have spoken. But again, it's the roots, it's the civil society people that are going to make all this a reality and have always. We know that social movements are what brings change. And we are engaged in a social movement to make peace building institutionalized within our societies, in our national governments, in our societies at all levels. So what I brought up here is in connection with the United Nations is a movement to pass a resolution in the General Assembly calling for the creation of ministries and departments of peace worldwide. And the movement is to create 8 million signatures, and we're well over 1.5 or 2 million now. And so if you can see, can you read this? I'm not sure you can from everywhere you're sitting, but if you go to peacenow.org, you will find there an ability to sign the petition calling for this resolution to be introduced and passed in the General Assembly. And I also commend to you, when you go on that site, you'll be invited to look at this film called Admissions, which is an incredibly powerful film, which takes place essentially at the pearly gates, when people appear there to see whether they go to heaven or hell. As you'll see, well, I'm not going to give it away, but you will find, I think you'll find this incredibly engaging, this video, and this will then invite you to add your signature, and we can get there, and we will get there, and we will get this resolution passed. I know that Ambassador Chowdhury is behind it, so generally what he's behind gets happening. You know, it happens. So that's a wonderful thing. So with that, I would like to say that I would throw the floor open to conversation. One thing I would say, though, that compassion has extended very deeply into this community. When I went into the men's room, even the urinals are graduated in various levels. Now, I think that is really taking compassion very far.
So we're not going to have any questions.
Yeah, we're ready. Yeah. Okay, the floor is open. If anybody would like to enter into this conversation, please.
One question.
Yes?
Yeah. We have time for one question or one
We
comment.
got one question?
Yes.
Okay. One question. I did see a couple of hands come up, but you mean you all agree with me? This is the way forward, and then thank you. Thank you.
Oh.
Given that our United States spends as much as the next 10 nations combined on defense, how do you think we might persuade our fellow Americans to spend commensurate funds on programs to build peace?
Thank you for the question. Well, the way we are working, of course, is to create within each cabinet a minister or secretary of peace. And this is a kind of a countervail to the influence of the Department of Defense, and presumably would also increase the resourcing of that department, not commensurate with defense, because of course we're not involved in hardware. But this would be one of the ways that our way of seeing this as happening. So you have a much better balance in cabinet when making decisions around peace and conflict. I'll give you one example in Canada. In 2003, when Canada considered its engagement in Afghanistan, it was only the Department of Defense that actually had a program that was coherent. And that was to enter combat in Afghanistan with the other coalition of the willing, as this phrase is sometimes stated. And that is what we did. And did we enhance the situation there? Did we improve the situation there? We did not. So a minister of peace, who would be mandated that all matters of peace and security would have to be referred also to the minister of peace for inclusion. How would we have been in Afghanistan? Was there alternatives? What are the alternatives? The nonviolent alternatives to combat mission, to a combat mission in that country? Or even would we have been better never to have engaged at all? I have no answer to that. It never happened. But this is how we would balance the nature of decision-making in cabinet, where peace and nonviolence and alternatives to conflict, to war, would be systematically presented and debated within that framework.
Thank you.